Hey everybody, thanks so much for coming out today. I want to spend the next 12 or so minutes taking you through a topic that I think is often misrepresented. And before I dive in, I want to start by asking you to think about your day. So what are your habits? Actually, do we have the, perfect. What are the habits, the goals, the decisions you make on a regular basis? For example, let's say you wake up this morning, you think about, are you going to work out or not? Did you pay for that gym membership? Does that affect how you feel about how you're going to spend your time? You head to the office. Do you drive or take public transit? Do you stop and pick up Starbucks or Dunkin' along the way? We all have choices that we make every single day about what we consume, and yet one of the most impactful choices that many of us make on a regular basis is something I think that we haven't necessarily framed the same way, and that's where we work. So today I want to take you a little bit through what goes on in the mind of people, especially millennials, as they're making the 7 career shifts that the average person will make in a typical lifetime. And in many cases, these career shifts are driven by what they think other people want, by some sense of cultural norms, financial expectations, and not necessarily by the factors that I think lead to a most satisfied career and professional life. So, as John said, I'm Kathryn Minshew, founder and CEO of a company called The Muse. We're 5.5 years old, started in a living room in Brooklyn, and now we help over 50 million people every year navigate their careers, and over 600 companies from Facebook and Dropbox to Goldman Sachs, HBO, and Marriott hire and retain their employees more effectively. And we've learned a lot over the last couple years. We've learned through providing people career advice and career coaching. We've learned through connecting them with personalized job search. What are they looking for? How are they doing that? When you immerse somebody in a culture or an organization, what is it they care about the most? But what I want to talk to you about today is not what we do at the Muse. It's something much deeper than that. Now, there's a quote that many of you have probably heard. It's one of my absolute least favorites. And it was said to me first, actually probably not first, but the time that I remember it was in an argument with my father when I was about 22 years old. I hated my job, and I felt like I was stuck in some sort of soul-crushing, mind-numbing work that was supposed to continue until I die. And I remember complaining about it one day at lunch, and he said, "Work's work. If it was fun, they wouldn't pay you for it." But I don't think that's the only way. And in fact, I want to take us back to a concept that's much deeper and much older than that. And it comes from the ancient Greeks. They had a word called eudaimonia. Translated, it is most sort of accurately translated as human flourishing. But you could also call it joy, purpose, satisfaction. The things that put people into a state of flow or give them a deep feeling of contentment in their day-to-day lives. And yet, when you think about human flourishing, that's not what most of us get in a classic job description, is it? In fact, this is one of the things I find so fascinating at the Muse. Companies spend millions of dollars and hundreds of man-hours trying to advertise their products, trying to get people to engage in a short-term transaction, like a cup of coffee, a particular pair of sneakers, a gym membership. But instead, they're not spending that same energy branding their positions, their people, their potential. And I think it's time for us to think about changing that. Now, it's not an easy thing to change because it's been going on for a very long time. 100 years ago, someone might have posted a newspaper ad or a notice in the town square asking for men to undertake a hazardous condition. Maybe it was a fishing charter looking for a midshipman, 14-hour days, but time off in between sailings. Then go to 50 years ago, the Mad Men era. It was a comfortable job, a pension, retirement, maybe a company parking space. About 5 years ago, maybe 10, companies started to get more savvy and realize that maybe they should brand or market themselves to potential candidates, but they didn't always do so in a very authentic way. These companies posted pictures like this and said, "Come join us. We have beanbag chairs. There's kombucha on tap." If they were trying to describe the work environment, they often fell into a jargon trap where they talk about a synergistic work environment that values team players. What on earth does that actually mean? And I think what's so fascinating is that this paradigm hasn't made the changes that I believe it should have. Even though companies are competing for talent more fiercely than ever before, there are still massive gaps in how companies invest in marketing themselves to candidates, in the tools they use to take someone's application, to usher them through an interview process. Do you know for the average Fortune 1000 company, it takes almost 40 minutes to apply to a job? This is absolutely ridiculous. And you might argue, sure, those big Wall Street jobs, maybe those salaries advertise themselves. Or Google and Facebook. They offer free food, great perks. Should they even need to think about that? But I don't think those things, perks, salaries, get at the core of what we mean by human flourishing, by the desire of people to connect with what they do on a day-to-day basis. And I also don't think it takes into account the rest of us. If you're not working on Wall Street or at a company that offers outrageous perks, do you deserve human flourishing as well? I absolutely believe you do, but I think part of the solution is reframing how we think about jobs, and specifically which ones are good and which ones are bad. Because ultimately, one of the things we talk a lot about at the Muse is that the search for a career is very personal. It's not based on what your parents or your friends or society thinks might be a good job or a bad job, but what matters to you, your core career values. For example, we like to divide jobs into good or bad, but when you really look deeper, it's not always that simple. For example, city librarian. Some people here may think that's an opportunity to interact with the community, foster a love of learning. Other people might think about being trapped in a small room dealing with screaming kids all day. Garbage man. This one is maybe a little bit more controversial. It's very easy to think of the downsides. You're literally waking up and dealing with people's shit all day. On the flip side, it's a very stable job. People are always going to produce trash. And in many cases, you get off early enough to pick your kids up from school or take care of whatever it is you want in the day. And then there's the sexy jobs. It's very easy to glamorize the corner office, the nice paycheck, the big title. And yet for many people, this is a rat race. And the idea of being tethered to their phone, BlackBerry, for 24 hours a day is absolutely infuriating. And that brings me to the group that I was asked to talk about today, which is millennials. I think there's often a perception that millennials want to show up on day one, get the big job, the promotion, the paycheck, but our research shows it's a little bit more nuanced than that. For example, what motivates millennials, as frankly all human individuals, is different on a person-by-person basis. And that's why I think it's very hard to stereotype this generation as any one thing. Some millennials are looking to make a change or move on. Others want autonomy in what they do, or a job that allows them an outlet for creativity, or a leadership opportunity, or one of a number of different core values that might motivate someone to either join or stay at a company. One difference about this generation is that if they don't find that thing in their role, they're much more likely to say, it's an open marketplace and I can see everyone else's jobs and lives online through social media, so I'm going to move on. I don't believe there's any one such thing anymore as a dream job, although it's very tempting to think so. We're moving from a construct in which there was a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a series of fairly finite contained career paths, into one in which your work journey might look more like a spider web or a lattice with a number of big changes and shifts based on the skills you've acquired and the things that matter to you at that specific phase in your life. In fact, this is one of the constants, that nothing is permanent but change. And I think that the fact that the workplace is becoming more dynamic is also meaning that when people don't find what they're looking for at a particular employer, they are more likely to look for that thing elsewhere. And personally, I think that's a really positive thing. It's also important for companies to realize that trust isn't a given. I think the days when a company could put up a job posting or a career site and say, we're a great place to work. Are you really? Millennials are much more comfortable than other generations to check that out, ask their friends, look at online review sites, understand whether that truly holds up. Companies love to say we're committed to diversity and inclusion, but are you really? Would all of your employees say that? As a business, I think there's both an incredible opportunity to really develop that trust through authenticity and honesty with potential candidates and with your employees, but there's also a lot of ways to mess it up for companies that are not willing to be authentic and not willing to be honest. Ultimately, I think we're leading to a major shift in the way companies have to think about hiring. And it's this idea of needing to position a career like you might advertise a product. There are thousands of software engineering jobs open at this very second. And if I'm a software engineer, why should I take yours? What's different about it? What opportunities exist for me at your company? I don't think this is about entitlement so much as it is that people, I believe, work better when they're with an organization that matches their values. And the more organizations can be transparent about that, again, in very authentic, honest ways, the more likely they are to attract satisfied, engaged employees. When I talk to HR, which I do on a regular basis as part of my job with the Muse, I have to keep reminding them, you are not just an HR department anymore. You are literally becoming an employment marketer. And that doesn't give you license to say things that are not true, because I also believe that people today have a very, very high authenticity detector. They will sniff out that BS in a minute. And if you attract people on promises that aren't true, it's a lot harder to keep them and to keep them engaged and motivated. So finally, what does that mean? First, if you're looking to understand how to attract, engage, and retain an employee base, whether it's millennials or not, you want to start by thinking of your people as individual humans. I think borrowing from marketing in this respect is really interesting because they tend to start by researching who is it you're trying to attract. For example, let's say you'd like to build out a sales team. Sitting down with some of your best existing salespeople or great salespeople at another company and asking them, what matters to you? What sort of workplace would excite you? What sort of descriptions in a job description might make you think that's somewhere I want to work? And then use that research to inform your own materials. Secondly, focus on the benefits, but the real one. I think it's great to say that you have free food or unlimited coffee or hammocks in the office. Great. If that's your thing, absolutely, go do that. But that is not what drives people to join and stay at a company. In fact, we see it tends to be much deeper. It's around the people they'll be working with, the purpose or the mission of the role, and the pathways to growth, the opportunities for learning and development. And then finally, make sure you allow for choice and control. Life is kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure book. And if everyone at your company ends up stuck in the same dead end or leading to the same path, it doesn't allow people to feel like they have that autonomy that I think so many people crave. Don't be the choose-your-own-adventure book that only has one ending. That's not a very successful title. And finally, ultimately, at the end of this, I think what we'll see is that companies that really invest in allowing people to do what they love within a construct that values them and that connects with some of their core professional needs are going to be substantially more successful than companies that don't, because the market is becoming more transparent. It's no longer enough for an individual to Google a job, see 50 results, and apply to all of them and then figure it out later. People are doing their research, and they are holding companies to higher standards. But again, I think this is an opportunity for businesses to really invest and to up their game, and ultimately that will make them better positioned against their competitors. And at the end of the day, the more companies can bring that authenticity to the table and then engage their employee bases, that loyalty will pay off over time, and I believe that will make all the difference. So thank you so much for having me, and really appreciate the time.